So far, I've been on 3 dates. 3 different people. 3 different dates. The first person was Max. Exceptionally tall and slim. We went out to a restaurant and talked all night about things that I can't recall. Every word seemed so important that I felt the need to linger on it for a while, but the subjects changed so rapidly and so fluidly, like a flowing river. He presented himself in a charming manner, subtly flirting with me and yet still not being overtly forward. We both enjoyed the night and made plans to catch up sometime in the near future. He was found, early the next day, slumped over a garbage bin in an alleyway. His legs were cut off and were placed against his body, the blood from the incision trailing down his back. His heart was removed from his body and was never found. Needless to say, that shook me. I had never had a death impact me that hard. The gruesomeness of it all felt like a punch to the gut. I felt as if I was stuck in a rut, with no way of clambering out. I had found someone that, for the first time, I had felt such a strong connection to. He seemed to be the perfect man, and now he was gone, cruelly taken from this world. Sleep was hard to come by, and my tears flowed freely. Then I met Evan. He was of a middling size, his physique not as appealing as Max's, but he was extremely intelligent and humorous enough to make up for it. We went to the cinemas for a first date and had to leave halfway through the movie on account of the fits of laughter he would send me in. We instead made our way to a nearby park, talking and laughing and having a great time. I left cheerful and brimming with hope that Evan would be the key to helping me move on. He was found at home, sprawled on the floor. His scalp was removed from his head, and his brain was cut in half and left by his side. His heart was also removed from his body. The detective I spoke with mentioned that the incisions were perfectly straight, cutting in ways that a simple knife wouldn't be able to do. Which meant that these killings were not some random attack, but rather one of purpose. Someone had killed Evan methodically. And enjoyed it. One death could be written of as a coincidence, things like these do happen. But 2, something else was going on. And the correlating factors seemed to be dating me. And so when Matthew asked me out, I was hesitant. But he was persistent. He knew full well what had happened to my other dates and was confident that he could take care of himself. Standing at 6 feet 5 inches, he was a mountain of a man, after all. It was a simple evening. We ordered in pizza at his apartment and watched Netflix. That new show everyone is talking about. Afterwards, he took my virginity. It was the most amazing experience I ever had, and judging by the way Matthew performed, he definitely wasn't a first-timer. Leaving his house, I felt happy and fulfilled. But worried. Very worried. He was found outside a gym, his torso cut in half, and his heart removed. Another chat with a detective revealed that this was the most brutal of the attacks. While both Evan and Max were killed instantly, an autopsy revealed Matthew was kept alive for hours and tortured to the point of collapsing. The bruises that covered his body painted a tale of unimaginable horror. The police began to question me more, as there were 3 suspicious deaths all related to me. I retreated inside myself and rarely left the house for anything. Life became bleak and worthless. Everything just seemed meaningless. I was terrified to meet new people, afraid that even them saying hello to me would result in their death. I was scared that the killer would choose me as their next victim, subjugating me to all manner of vile acts. My life was a danger to anyone I loved. And so, I would not allow myself to love anymore. Retreating inside my house was the only viable option. I opened my door yesterday to a bouquet of flowers. I let out a half-hearted smile, realizing that someone was trying to cheer me up. Most likely a worried family member. Touched by the thoughtfulness, I picked up the flowers and tried to find a vase somewhere in my house to place them in. As I was walking through my house, 3 pieces of paper fluttered out of the flowers and onto the ground. Furrowing my brow, I picked them up and took a closer look at them. On each piece of paper was a Polaroid photo of a human heart. And on the back of each photo was a message, scribbled in pen. "Only my heart belongs to you." Kim's terrified eyes stared up at me. She had been forcibly bent and twisted to fit into the tiny compartment, and her limbs were locked in place by the hands and feet of a rotting corpse. A corpse wearing the remains of a broad-brimmed black hat and a dirty trench coat. The corpse of Dirty Tom Callforth. With a cry, I jumped into the hole and pried the rigor mortis-locked fingers off my wife's wrists. I grabbed her beneath her armpits and dragged her away from the eyeless skull grinning up at us. By night, Dirty Tom's vengeful spirit was a powerful and murderous force, but by day, he was just rotting bones in a suitcase. I held Kim. She wasn't ready to speak, but I knew she would when the time was right. My mother lifted up the other tools I had brought from my mother's garage, charcoal and a gas can. She poured them over the suitcase, said a prayer, and dropped a match. We stood in a circle and watched the past burn. Hoping that it would forgive us. Hoping that maybe, this time, it wouldn't come back to haunt us. For as long as I can remember, my father has been irrationally afraid of mimes. I've witnessed him transform into a sweating, quivering mess at the mere sight of them. No one understood why this was, as he would always dismiss it angrily whenever he was questioned about it, pretending they didn't affect him at all. While this became a running joke in our family, I was always intrigued about the reason behind this peculiar trait of his. Well, this Christmas, after filling him up with generous servings of cake and wine, I finally got him to tell his story. I took his account down, almost word for word, on my phone. It's quite a tale, I can assure you of that. You genuinely wish to post this on the internet? It appears highly unbelievable, so don't be surprised if they accuse you of fabricating this whole story, alright? Goodness, where do I even begin? So, you know that I migrated to this country back in the early 90s, right? It was a couple of years before I met and married your mother. Times were challenging for someone like me back then. I had to work 2 jobs merely to ensure food on the table and a roof above my head. Even then, all I could afford was the shabbiest apartment in this dilapidated old building in a neighborhood riddled with crime. The area was so bad that a night wouldn't pass without the sound of at least one gunshot echoing. Just a moldy, decaying place to live in. My second job was a weekend gig where I served as a bartender at the local strip club. Heh, it was named the Rear End. It was seedy, and not something I'm particularly proud of, but working there was definitely preferable to sleeping on the streets. What's that? Yes, your mother knows, we just avoid discussing that part of my life. Don't give me that look, those women were some of the bravest, most honorable people I've ever known. Anyway, due to my job, I would return to my apartment late, like 2 or 3 a.m. late. I need you to grasp how late it usually was during those nights, so you can genuinely appreciate just how bizarre what I saw in the elevator that day was. It was a Saturday night, I remember it well. I was exhausted and wanted to get back to my bedroom as quickly as I could. I entered my building, shuffled over to the elevator, and saw a mime there waiting. Makeup, white face, blood-red lips, striped shirt, the full attire. He was holding a string tied to a balloon in one hand and waving at something distant with the other, all while displaying this eerie, lifeless smile. And his hand moved unnaturally, almost mechanically. He jerked his hand, left, right, still smiling at something far off into the distance behind me with wide, unblinking eyes. Yes, there was indeed just a wall behind me. Nothing else, which made it so creepy. I mean, I've seen all sorts of strange occurrences in this country, but nothing could compare to encountering a mime in the elevator of my apartment building at 3:30 in the morning. I was thoroughly unsettled and decided to take the stairs to my 9th floor apartment. I was in decent shape back then, so that climb, while tiring, wasn't impossible. Sometimes I would even use those stairs for exercise. I guess what I'm saying is that I wasn't concerned about climbing all the way to the 9th floor, so the decision to use the stairs wasn't a tough one. I think I had reached the 4th or 5th floor when I noticed something moving from the corner of my eye. I paused, turned around, and there he was, climbing the stairs a couple of floors below me. Have you ever seen those old silent films? Ever see a character tiptoe around in an exaggerated manner when they're trying to make it obvious how important silence is? That's how he was walking, with his hands balled up into fists in front of him and climbing with these freakishly long strides, jumping over multiple steps at a time, only using the tips of his toes to pull himself up. He froze when I saw him, statue with one leg suspended in air as he stood precariously. I expected him to tip over and fall backwards any second, but he didn't move even an inch. It was like he had turned to stone. Not all of him, however. He had this strange expression on his face, almost this cutesy oops mommy caught me stealing the cookies again shit, and his eyes were darting around rapidly, refusing to acknowledge my presence. I was this close to losing my shit, but I steeled my nerves and spoke up. Hey man. Cut it out. I laughed nervously. You got me, man. Hilarious shit. I tried to rationalize it to myself, that it was nothing but a prank or a practice performance or something, you know. I don't have any money, man. I added. I'm dirt poor. So, you can stop now. With that, I picked up my pace and started running upstairs. My blood ran cold as I heard him start moving again, much faster this time, but in the exact same motion. I looked behind me again. He was just one floor below me, again turned into this living statue shit. But he was so close to me this time I could see the whites of his eyes as he stared off into the distance. It was so bizarre. I didn't even know whether this was all malicious or not, you know? Was this mime trying to hurt me? I think knowing that he was a psycho nut would have made it easier to deal with. But this? It was irrational. The fear I felt was primal, shaking me to my core. I screamed at him. What do you want? I shouted at the top of my lungs, not caring who would wake up, no, hoping someone would. Leave me alone, idiot. His expression instantly changed at that. He looked, sad almost, but it was frighteningly disingenuous, like he was putting on a show. His face fell, and he brought his hand up to wipe off a non-existent tear. I watched in stunned silence as he then proceeded to climb the railing of the stairs and jump before I could so much as open my mouth. I screamed and quickly bent over the stairs to see what happened. He was sprawled on the ground, 6 floors down, limbs twisted at odd angles and lying in a pool of blood. I must have spent almost a minute just staring at his lifeless body, wondering what just happened. At the back of my mind, I knew that I had to call the cops or something, but I was far too shocked to even move. It was a tingling sensation in my spine that brought me back to reality. This strange feeling of being watched, like thousands of ants running down your back. I looked up at the stairs above me, and I kid you not, son, there he was, that mime, looking at his own dead body with this shocked expression on his face. He was holding his cheeks like that screen painting, and his mouth had dropped open with his eyes threatening to pop out of his sockets. His face was just inches from mine, and I damn near peed my pants. Do you see my hands right now? Do you see how they're shaking, just thinking about that night? Imagine how terrified I must have been back then. My body had just shut down, refusing to move, and we both stood there, like statues, like a living art installation. He was the one who moved. After about half a minute or so of being utterly still, his eyes moved and finally locked onto mine for the first time that night. Shivers ran down my spine as I stared into those deep pits of nothingness, but the spell was broken, and I could move my body again. I stumbled and fell backwards, but quickly scampered off to my feet and ran. And kept running until I left the building, not bothering whether I was still being followed and doing my hardest to keep away from the body lying on the ground floor. I stayed awake that whole night, grabbing a coffee at the first cafe that opened at the crack of dawn. Of course, I anonymously called the cops from a payphone in the morning, and of course there was no body in the building when the cops later showed up. I am not a very religious man, but I knew that shit was not something logic could explain. For the next week, I stayed away from my apartment as much as I could, only going there to shower and or change my clothes, spending the nights at friends' places after making just the weakest excuses imaginable. No. I didn't tell anyone. Are you crazy? Who would believe me? And no, there were no CCTVs in that building. Poverty is cruel, son. I could no longer impose myself on my friends and didn't want to go to the homeless shelter, so I decided to go back to sleeping in my apartment. I tried to fool myself into thinking that what I had experienced wasn't real, that I had dreamt it all up. Like it was all just a hallucination. But deep within me, I knew that it was real. All of it. And that it would probably happen again. A feeling of tremendous dread washed over me when I stood outside my building 8 nights after I first ran into that mime. It was again pretty late, around the same time when I had ran into him the last time. With a heavy heart, I trudged over to the elevator, trying to avoid thinking about the fear clutching and squeezing my heart. I couldn't even look at the spot where he had fallen and chose to stay away from it. The elevator opened with a soft dinge and I breathed a sigh in relief to see that it was empty. Why didn't I just take the stairs? No. Too much trauma associated with that place. Better to be cramped inside a fast-moving elevator than risk climbing the stairs and meeting the suicidal mime from hell. I guess I should be thankful that my elevator ride was peaceful. I don't think I would have survived if he had shown up there. A heart attack would have killed me long before he could slice me up or something, I don't know. I fumbled with my keys, but quickly got in and locked the door behind me. Kicking my shoes off, I immediately ran to the comfort of my blanket and curled up in there, trying hard to fall asleep, but staying awake like an owl. So this apartment was pretty small, right? Just 2 rooms, excluding the bathroom. So you can hear whatever is happening in any corner of the room. You get where I'm going with this? No. He wasn't in the house, but he was outside of it. I heard something rustling around outside my front door and instinctively knew that it was him. At first I thought I'd just stay there in my bed, but the rustling didn't stop. The fear just kept on building inside me, and it was becoming unbearable to just stay there. My heart was beating so fast I feared it would leap out of my mouth. I got up to investigate. I banged my toe against the foot of the bed and yelped, with the sounds from outside ceasing almost instantly. After controlling my pain, I walked over to the door, as softly as I could, and looked through the peephole. I whimpered as my fears were confirmed. There he was, that mime, standing with his back to the wall in front of me, at attention, like some damn army cadet. I think he must have sensed me watching him, because as soon as I looked through the peephole, he bent over forwards, such that his upper body was almost parallel to the floor. His blood-red lips stretched into this most vicious smile and he began to stare right at me. I don't know how, but he was somehow looking straight at me. No, he wasn't anywhere near the peephole, so I don't know how, but I knew he was watching me watching him. I felt his eyes pierce my very soul, taunting me, letting me know he was playing with me and that he could kill me whenever he wished. He brought his palms up to the side of his face, opened his mouth, and began clicking his tongue. Except I never heard the clicking sound. What I heard was a knock, and my door began to shake. Knock, knock, knock. Short bursts of 3. I fell back in fear. You know, he wasn't near the door, but he still knocked. I don't know what was happening, but I knew I couldn't stay there even for a second. I climbed out of my window and began descending using the iron emergency exit stairs attached to the side of the building. I heard something impossibly large and strong slam against the door to my house as I began to climb down that rickety iron staircase. My door gave in with a painfully loud crunch and I almost fell down. Why didn't anyone come out to check what was happening, you ask? Well, people mostly minded their own business. Home invasions, murders, drug deals gone wrong, it could be anything. Not necessarily something demonic. At one point on my way down, I considered just jumping and ending my life, I was that terrified. But I shook my head and continued to fight for my survival. I was soon free. I was out of that infernal building and panting and catching my breath on the streets below. I looked back up at where my apartment was and saw for the last time in my life. He was standing on the railing of the emergency stairs right outside my bedroom without a care in the world. I don't know how he balanced himself on that thing, but he stood there, staring at me with that up smile on his face. He theatrically brought his hands up and clapped. I watched in terrified silence as one by one, the lights in all of the apartments began to switch on. He was there, in every apartment at the windows that I could see. He was Jesus, he was performing, if that makes any sense. In one house he was miming drinking tea, in another juggling invisible balls. But the original one continued to stare at me, and then with another clap, switched off every light in the building and disappeared, leaving me shivering in the darkness. Jesus Christ, Dad. I whispered. Did that really happen? That's up to you. He replied. I know what I saw. So, did you go back there again? I asked. He shook his head furiously. Never in the night. Never again. I moved out as soon as I found another place. What happened to that building? He sighed. I kept tabs on it. The owner had to sell it to a builder. It was just not profitable anymore. A bunch of suicides occurred there, like 2 to 3 each year for half a decade. Bad omen all around. The new owner tore it down and built a shopping mall there. A shopping mall? Which one? I asked. He looked at me blankly. You don't mean... My blood froze as the realization sunk in. But... They have a mime performance in the amphitheater there every month. He nodded. I worked the night shift at a 24-hour Walmart. The town's small, everyone knows everyone else, so it didn't take long for me to memorize our late-night regulars. There's the guy in the flannel shirts who always buys 2 cans of dog food, and the lady with violet hair that I swear has more cats than the local shelter. There's the old man who buys a single apple every night like clockwork. They're just people, normal in every way, except they never seem to leave. I started noticing them about 3 months in. No matter what time I glanced at the clock, 1 a.m., 3 a.m., 5 a.m., they were always there, wandering the aisles, their items perpetually in their hands, never making it to my register. One night, curiosity getting the better of me, I approached the old man. Excuse me, sir, I said, are you finding everything okay? He turned to me, his eyes an unnerving blank. His hand tightened around the apple. Just getting my shopping done, he replied in a monotone. I watched him shuffle away, his gait eerily robotic. That was the night I realized the lady with the violet hair never had any cat litter, and the man in flannel never had any dog toys or leashes. I started to question my sanity. One day, I clocked in for my usual shift. At exactly midnight, as the last of the evening shift employees left, the automatic doors malfunctioned, jamming shut with a loud thud. Calls to the manager and the local locksmith proved futile. It was just me, locked inside, with our perpetual shoppers. Hey, do you need any help? I asked the man in the flannel, my voice shaky. I'm just getting my shopping done, he replied in the same monotone as the old man, a vacant look in his eyes. The store seemed to shift. The humming of the overhead fluorescent lights grew louder, turning into a deafening roar. The customers all stopped, turning towards me with those vacant eyes. Their mouths opened in unison, emitting a bone-chilling monotone, just getting our shopping done. As I stared into their blank faces, their features began to distort, their human forms melting away to reveal gray, featureless beings. Fear gripped me. I was trapped inside Walmart with creatures wearing a human mask. The rest of the night was a blur of terror. I spent it hiding in the back storage, listening to the droning echo of their voices throughout the store, just getting our shopping done. With dawn's first light, the doors unjammed. As soon as they opened, the creatures froze, returning to their human forms. I quit the very next day. I don't know what those creatures were, or why they gather at Walmart every night. But if you ever find yourself at a Walmart after midnight, pay attention to the shoppers who never check out. They might be doing more than just getting their shopping done.